Hi everyone, my name is Richard Santoro and I welcome you to Third and Zen, the YouTube channel where every week I am sharing a spiritual message to nourish ourselves, heart, mind, body, and soul. First, thanks for stopping by the channel. As always, I really appreciate it. If you feel like liking, subscribing, sharing, that's all great and good, but most importantly, thank you for being here, and I hope you're doing well. I hope, as always, you're taking the time to care for yourself, and I hope you're always remembering your value, your worth, and the value and worth that in which you deserve time, energy, effort, and love. So again, hope you're doing well. Thanks for being here. With that being said, let's prepare ourselves a little bit. Let's find a quiet space, externally, internally, and just breathe. Give yourself permission to be here in this moment. The world's going to go on without us for a few, and it's going to be okay. Give ourselves permission to stop, to be here now. Just breathe, settle, relax, take it easy, soften, breathe, calm, still. And let's get started with today's message, shall we? So I have been a fan of Batman literally my entire life. I have always been a huge fan, ever since I was a little toddler. One of the oldest pictures I have of myself out at Shelter Island, Long Island, Camp Quinnipiac is me in the sweatshirt. I still remember this Batman sweatshirt. It was yesterday. I must have been like 3, 4 years old, but I've always loved Batman, from the TV show, the campy Adam West show, on up through the movies, all the comic books, the graphic novels through the years. Through every phase and journey of my life, I have been a huge Batman fan. Comics, movies, all of it. The character, I love it. Huge fan. If you've seen some of my videos where I do it from home and I have the bookshelf, I have different, Batman statues and whatnot. So it's not a secret that I love Batman. I do love Batman. As I mentioned, when I was a kid, when I was little, I loved Batman. And then when I got older, into my early adult years, I really started to connect with Batman differently. Because at that point in life, I had gone from being a young kid, and then into my teen years, and then into my early adult years. And in those early adult years, in my 20s or whatever, I was trying to rebound, recover, heal, deal with the traumas I had faced in my teenage years. So I was dealing with that, and Batman was somebody that I connected with. I obviously had at that point, a lifelong love with Batman, but I started to connect and relate in a way that I found helpful for me, and that I looked at Batman as someone that had gone through tragedy, albeit different tragedy, but had gone through tragedy and suffering, and Batman, Bruce Wayne / Batman, had turned his suffering, his trauma, his tragedy into what I thought was a cool and dark and brooding hero, and this towering individual of strength that was built upon the trauma. I related to that. I wanted so very badly to relate to that. I wanted to be that cool with my pain and with my suffering and with my trauma. I wanted that, and it helped me at the time, as one of the ways to deal with it. All right, relate to something you love and find meaning in it, and find a healthy path and journey. But it turns out I was wrong. It turns out I was wrong. I was wrong about Batman. Now, let me just say right off the bat, I still love Batman. I'm gonna love Batman my entire life. Still always gonna be one of my favorite characters. But in this particular lane that I've described so far, it turns out I was wrong. With online and the internet and everything, sometimes people give their opinions and their thoughts, as we know about the internet. And some people have pointed out some very interesting insights about Bruce Wayne, about the Batman character, that Batman is actually a person who never, or I should say Bruce Wayne, is a person who never properly dealt with his trauma and pain. And Bruce Wayne / Batman goes around beating up and crippling criminals, many of whom are often are mentally ill, not to excuse their criminal behavior or anything, but that's what he does. He didn't deal with his trauma, his pain. He channeled it into this figure of vengeance who thought he was going to go out and keep the streets of Gotham safe by sticking to this code of not killing, which is great, but all the while like beating up and literally crippling human beings, some of whom are mentally ill. And at the same time, he also doesn't use his massive resources, from his wealth, his power, his standing, his means, his intellect. He doesn't use all those tools and resources to actively, positively, healthily affect change in society. So, yeah, again, Batman is cool. I still love the character a ton, I really do. But I was wrong about him being someone who turned his pain, his suffering, and his trauma into a cool persona. I was wrong about that. Again, I love Batman, and it helped me get through some difficult times in my life, but when I assessed the character and my outlook on it, it turns out that I was wrong. And you know what? It's okay to be wrong. I'm fine with it. It's cool. Smart people with a different insight, different experiences, different journeys pointed some things out that I was not objective enough to see. Obviously, I pointed out how the love, lifelong love through different phases I had, and how in certain ways I needed this individual, this character, to be a certain thing, and it helped me. But I was wrong about him, and that's completely okay. Once I was presented with new evidence, I took it in and said, yeah, it's a great point. Do we allow ourselves space and humility to be wrong? Do we allow ourselves space and humility to be wrong about a plethora of things? Individual things, personal things, relational things, outlook, society, all these different things. I mean, I'm sorry, I'm going to step off the path here for a second, but I look at our society, and I mean, the cult of Donald Trump, I mean, people just aren't ever, they can't, the cognitive dissonance to admit you were wrong about this individual. I mean, ignoring the litany of grievances, I mean, and so much going into, and then during, and then after. Christian nationalism and Christian elitism and the exclusivity of some Christians in the hierarchy of society, and looking at other individuals, and I've alluded to this in previous message, and saying, your behavior is a sin, I'm going to point at you, and this is what's a sin and this is what isn't, and judging others. And I feel a little judgy saying that, I'm sorry. But do we hold space for and have humility in admitting that we're wrong about a plethora of things? And Scripture is replete with individuals. There are a litany of people who realized that they were wrong. And what's beautiful about those individuals in Scripture is that for them, being wrong was a wonderful gateway to God, to a new path, new relationship with God, a new path and a new relationship with life and with society and with individuals around them. Being wrong was the gateway for people, from Moses on all the way up through to Paul. You know, I love in the Gospel of John. In the Gospel of John, people, whether people who are named or anonymous people, are often stand-ins for different, you know, maybe types of people in society. And we can, you know, so then we can relate to this one, to that one, in all different ways. And Nicodemus is a great one in the Gospel of John. Because in the Gospel of John, Nicodemus is a stand-in, as I alluded to before with some of the, you know, the people in our society today. Sorry, I was shooing away a bug. Nicodemus is a stand-in for the ultra-orthodox, the fundamental religious person who is entrenched in their ways, struggling to move away from that. Was Nicodemus wrong, you know, where he was? No, that's a stretch. I'm not going to say that, but I'm adding a new layer to this, in that he did change his mind at a certain point. He needed time and space to do that. He talked to Jesus, he questioned, he wasn't sure, but as the story goes, we do see he needed the time and the space, and for Nicodemus, he needed the cross and the resurrection, as many did in the Gospels, to assess, to examine, to change, to grow, to evolve, to learn. Do we leave space for changing our minds about society, about politics, about our political and societal, cultural positions? Excuse me, I'm going to wipe my nose. I'm so sorry. Pardon me. Sorry about that. Do we leave space to change our minds? Society, politics, political positions, cultural positions. Do we leave space and humility to change our minds about doctrine, religion, beliefs, our own and the doctrine, religions, and beliefs of others? Do we leave space and humility to change our minds about people, individuals, groups of people? Do we leave space and humility to change our mind about our outlook upon the other? A lot of people go into that other box and category. They get placed into that box and category. Other religions, other beliefs, other belief systems, other cultures, other cultural norms, other ways of living, gender identities, sexual orientations, and the like, family makeup, whatever it may be, the other. Do we leave space and humility to change our minds, see it differently, relate to it differently, approach it differently, accept it differently than we do or don't do? Do we leave space and humility to change our minds about our ideas about what is right and wrong, our ideas of morality, being the morality police, about what others do? Do we leave space and humility to change our mind about our points of view, our perceptions, our ideas of how things are and about how things ought to be? Do we leave space and humility to see where we are wrong? Do we leave space and humility to change all or any of these things within ourselves and within our relationship with the world around us, both our immediate worlds, our little universes of relationships, or with the larger society and world around us? I want to pivot here for a second. I just threw a lot of those do we leave space questions at us. I'm going to talk about David Letterman for a moment. David Letterman, where Batman was a character who, yes, I love and loved and currently love and related to and gained a lot from and changed on. It's a comic book character. David Letterman happens to be a real human being, as we know. Now, David Letterman is another one that I've always loved. He will always, I mean, obviously, David Letterman is a Mount Rushmore comedic figure in our society, but I've always loved him. He holds a special place in my heart. When I was younger, in early high school, my sister and I used to watch him when he had the Late Show on NBC, his first foray into national spotlight television when he was really starting out. And my sister and I used to watch him. We used to love him, and he's just so funny. So I've always enjoyed him. It's hard not to find this man funny and talented. Maybe some people don't like him, and that's totally fair. So David Letterman, somebody I always loved, somebody I always enjoyed. But man, now, at this phase of life, knowing some of the things I know and some of the wisdom I have now and some of the course corrections I have been blessed with to see things a little differently, looking back at some of David Letterman's interviews, at how he treated some people and approached certain topics with individuals, and some behind the scenes things about David Letterman, there's some issues. You know, in 10 years ago, he interviewed a young, I think she was 27, Lindsay Lohan, about her stint in rehab, and he was very not great about it. He made her cry. You know, somebody's going to rehab. You know, when he interviewed Janet Jackson after her wardrobe malfunction at the Super Bowl, and Justin Timberlake, you know, the male skated and Janet Jackson was eviscerated, and how Letterman treated her in that interview was problematic, and how Letterman treated Paris Hilton, you know, after she went to jail for a minor offense, or when she was arrested, and how he treated her in that interview. It was problematic. And then, you know, there were stories that he's admitted to and owned about his inappropriate behavior, you know, in various ways with a bunch of other people on air, particularly women. Female guests, again, to which he's owned and admitted. And as he said, and I quote, he did some terrible, terrible, creepy stuff. And, you know, the stuff he did behind the scenes, as I alluded to, which, again, he has since apologized for. And I was reading an interview where, you know, this was an interview in Vanity Fair where he was being interviewed by a former staffer who worked on the show, who left because of some of his behavior. It was really a profound interview. from a couple of years ago with an older, wiser David Letterman. He apologized, saying that, and I want to read this properly, and when he was interviewed by this individual, because this individual left the show and had written an article about why they left the show, and Letterman had recently read that interview to gain more insight from this person, but Letterman was aware of his behavior and had since owned it and apologized in a lot of public ways and personal ways. And this is what he said to the interview. He said, "I'm sorry. I'm sorry I was that way. And I was happy to have read the piece that I alluded to because it wasn't angering. I felt horrible because who wants to be the guy that makes people unhappy to work where they're working? I don't want to be that guy. I'm not that guy now. I was that guy." And as the interviewer said, Dave's willingness to speak to me on the record is part of him making amends. His acknowledgement of mistakes and a regret go out to those who he wronged. They also go out to the enablers and defenders of his behavior, of which sadly there are people that are like that. And just to further double down on David Letterman seeing how he was wrong, there's a very popular podcast with Jason Bateman and Will Arnett. And this always happens when I record these videos. Names elude me. The individual from Will and Grace, Sean. Let's call him Sean. Anyway, these three actors. Very popular podcast. They started during the pandemic, like a lot of people did, and it became hugely popular. And then they did a short tour through a few cities, which was recorded by HBO for a short little documentary behind the scenes. And one of their guests on this tour was David Letterman. And these three actors who I love during the the behind the scenes kept talking about cancel culture and, oh, you're going to be canceled, you're going to be canceled, which, it's a conversation. But they kept talking about it, and they asked Letterman on stage, said, you hear a lot of discussion about this. And they asked him about cancel culture, and this is what Dave said. You hear a lot of discussion about this. You hear a lot of discussion, oh, are we too woke? Are we canceling too quickly? Are we overcorrecting? And Letterman says, and I feel like, let's overcorrect and see what happens. There are many things that a person needs to be smart and sensitive about that heretofore perhaps we were not. Let me read that last part again, because that's really where it all lands. And I feel like, let's overcorrect and see what happens. There are many things that a person needs to be smart and sensitive about that heretofore perhaps we were not. David Letterman was an individual who earlier in life and in his career did not really, behave great all the time like we do. We make mistakes, and has since learned where he was wrong, and since has gained newer wisdom and newer enlightenment to see, yeah, that behavior was wrong, and maybe we don't do that. Maybe we do things differently. Maybe we change. Maybe we see that we were wrong and we change. And Letterman, he credits his wife with helping him see this, and he also he credits the therapeutic process. He went to go see a therapist and a psychiatrist and received help among many other healthy avenues that he took with seeing things differently and in a new way, himself and the world around him. He did the work. And sometimes we need to do the work. Sometimes we need to do the work. Sometimes we need to listen to maybe a wiser soul who has or not even just wiser, but just a person who has a different point of view. And maybe we need to see things maybe a little bit more objectively and fairly. As David Letterman shows, people can be wrong and see that and change their behavior and their attitudes and their outlooks. I've been wrong a lot in my life, and I'm probably wrong about things now, and I hope God gives me the grace and the wisdom and the sight to know and to see. When we are humble and when we are actively willing and when we make space for it, we can see if we're wrong and we can change, we can grow, and we can evolve. I'm sitting here in this wonderful autumnal setting. It's just beautiful. I'm in a different space because they moved all the tables and they're starting to prepare for winter. But, autumn is a perfect time. One of my dearest friends, she would always talk about how her New Year's resolutions she would do not at New Year's, but in autumn, because it is more of a season of change It is a season of change, and it's a reminder for us as I sit here in the peak of this season of change, as the trees change and drop their leaves, that we too can change if need be, and see that we're wrong if need be. It's liberating to change and to realize that we perhaps were wrong. You know, I love Batman. I'm always going to love Batman. And I'll always appreciate what Batman has meant to me as a character in my life through the different phases of my life. But also at the same time, I was wrong about the character. And that's okay. And I've been wrong about a great many things in my life. And that's okay too. We change. And we grow. And we learn. And we evolve. Thanks be to God. Amen. Okay, my friends, again, I want to thank you so much for being here. I love you all. I hope you have a great day. I hope you have a great journey throughout this week and a great journey going forward. I wish you nothing but peace, love, fellowship with God. Thank you for being here. You are all a joy. I love you all. Have a great one. Ciao, ciao.